Well, it looks like the Spyro series is still a huge attraction. Well, not necessarily a huge attraction, but still an attraction nonetheless, because Spyro series has been around since the 90s, and the Spyro Reignited Trilogy came out back in like 2018 or something. And it turns out that it managed to reach 10 million copies sold worldwide. And I believe the Crash Bandicoot Insane series also did that as well. But the thing is, they achieved that feat a lot sooner than Spyro did. And Spyro was one of those mascots that came around during the late 90s, during the early 3D era. And Spyro was really popular back in the day. And despite the success of the first three Spyro games from 98 to 2000, we never really got a Spyro 4. I'm pretty sure there were other like games and spin offs in the series that came out after Spyro 3 from 2000. But the thing is, for the most part, it seemed like the series in general had just declined in popularity over the 2000s decade, and even like during like the first half of the teens decade, because we got a couple of games for Game Boy Advance and for Nintendo DS, but no one really looked at those because during the 2000s, Pokemon and first person shooter games and RPGs and all that stuff became very popular, and Spyro just got overshadowed for the most part. But but a lot of people would love to see a Spyro 4 game sometime in the future, but I'm not exactly sure whether or not it's going to happen because if that were the case, it would have happened a very long time ago. And not only that, the original Spyro trilogy was a creation by Insomniac Games, and back in the day, it was licensed by Sony, Sony Computer Entertainment. Nowadays, things are a little bit different because it's licensed by Activision, and the developer that worked on the Reignited trilogy was Toys for Bob. And I'm not exactly sure whether or not they could put together a Spyro 4 game that would match the excitement of what Sony gave us back in the late 90s. But either way, um, Spiral is still a big deal. I mean, we got a Crash Bandicoot 4 game a few years ago, and even though a lot of people said it was great, I think it did pretty poorly in terms of sales. And if we get a Spiral 4 game, there's always that possibility that the same thing could happen. It could be a really good game, but then it sells poorly, especially considering how much the landscape of gaming has changed within the past 20 years or so. So, for the most part, it's cool that Spyro is still a name that people are familiar with. Is a name that can appeal to casuals, but a Spyro 4 game, I don't think is going to be any better than a Crash Bandicoot 4 game in general, because for the most part, the era of mascots and 3D platformers being mainstream and larger in life for the most part is over, unless it's like Mario or Sonic. Those are the two biggest names in relation to like popular platform gaming in general. And anything new that like if Activision does decide to make a new Spyro game, it's going to be overshadowed by so many things. And Mario and Sonic being two of those things. And then on top of that, people are more into RPGs and action adventure titles in general nowadays. And for the most part, consoles like the PS5 and Xbox Series X appeals more to adults than it does to kids. Back in the day, Spyro and Crash Bandicoot appealed more to children than it did adults. But at the same time, I do feel like the part of the success of Reignite Trilogy is the fact that adults who were kids back in the day, saw this, they picked it up, they enjoyed it, brought back some fond memories. Um, Honestly, at this point, the Spyro series is probably left in the past, and a Spyro 4 game probably wouldn't be a great idea. It would definitely turn heads if it was announced by Activision, but for the most part, I don't think the series is ever going to be as popular as it once was. And for the most part, it had peaked back in the 90s, and probably it'd be better off if the series just, was left alone for the most part. And I guess remakes of older games are acceptable, but Spyro in general, a Spyro 4 game is probably something that's not going to happen. So I don't think myself or anybody else would necessarily hold their breath on that being a possibility anytime in the near future.